the British came over here and they went to Curtiss, who was building P-40s. And they said, we want you to build P-40s for us. This is in the middle of 1940. So the Brits are seeing the storm clouds, and it's about to start the Battle of Britain. So they come to Curtiss and they say, as I mentioned, we want you to build P-40s. And Curtiss said, sorry, we're at capacity and we can't expand anymore. So the Brits go to North American and say, we want you to build P-40s under license build agreement with Curtiss. And North American said, we'll build you a better airplane to your specs on your timeline. If you remember from one of my early slides, or the factoid, in 5 months they had this airplane flying. So it was built to a British requirement to fight the war that the Brits saw coming. That was the A model. The A model it didn't have the bubble canopy, and it had an Allison engine in it. Okay, now I think for the war, we ended up building A's, B's, C's, and D's, total of over 15,000 total, and the D model with the bubble canopy was the most produced out of all those. A little over 7,000 D models were produced. And you've heard the story of this particular airplane. So a near combat veteran twice, who was sitting over in the attrition pool in England in '45, but didn't get called into a combat squadron. And kind of the same thing in Korea. Goes over into theater with the New Jersey Air National Guard, but did not see combat. Okay, so we'll talk about some things. While you're looking through here, you can take a look at some of the under innards here. These blue, and on the other side you'll see them better, the gold. Those are all the pipes to get the coolant out of the radiator and back up to the engine. So the gun bays, right? The first one had a 4 machine gun, 2 on each side. They expanded that with the B model. The B model and the C model, we'll talk about the Merlin a bit, but are the exact same airplane. The only difference is where they were built. Okay, some were built here in Inglewood, some were built in Dallas. That's the only difference. Other than that, their specs are exactly the same, the B and the C. So you can see the 6-gun position, and we have this open. You know, this is where we put our underwear when we go to an air show now. But that's where they laid those belts of ammunition. And the way you can look up, it's somewhat complicated, this little schematic to show the armorers how to position the guns and also how to move them to harmonize the sight range. Because they throw up 2 examples here, 250 yards and 300 yards. That's where they wanted all the bullets to converge where the sight was looking. And it was driven a little bit by what your mission was. Are you going air to air, or are you going to do straight? And they could change that harmonization range where they prop up the tail to get it in flight attitude, and then they can fine tune all 6 guns, 3 and 3, to harmonize out at the range that the unit wanted it to. So you can kind of see how they were, staggered. The breech of a machine gun is wider than the barrel, and so by staggering the guns a little bit, you could keep them closer together this way. And that has a great deal to do with maneuverability. The further you put machinery and weight out in the wing, the less maneuverable, or you have to compensate for the maneuverability. 6 guns each. Because the inner gun, the bullets went over top as it went in here, they could put more bullets. So you'd get 400 rounds on the center gun, or the inboard. The center and the outboard had a little under 300. The total was a little over 900 bullets per wing. So that's about 1,800 bullets per a fully loaded aircraft. The controls are locked. But if you look, there's a little fabric in there, and they called that a sealed aileron because they wanted to maximize the maneuverability. Every little molecule of air that's coming over here, some of it might sneak in here and come out the bottom side if it's not sealed. Most aircraft do not have sealed ailerons. And then you lose a little effectiveness of your flight control surface. So by sealing it, they're forcing all that air over the ailerons, and that just helps with maneuverability. So at the time this airplane was being designed, the precursor to NACA, NACA, was working on airfoils and wings. And North American was working in conjunction with them for a wing for this airplane. And they were working on this laminar flow wing. So if you look, these guys can look, where's the fat part of the wing? Right in the middle. A traditional, if you were to do the same thing on the T6 there, you know, I'm exaggerating here, but the bottom of a wing is typically flat-ish. And then you have the camber that comes up, and it's usually fatter up here, and then it tapers down. That's your traditional wing. So the fat part is up here at the leading edge of the wing. So this laminar flow, the fat part is here in the middle. And that did a couple things. It was very low drag, which allowed, especially when it got up at altitude and at speed, you know, it was very fuel efficient, and it helped it go faster with the low drag design of the wing. The downside, and every positive has a negative in aerospace design, is it's got a wicked stall. A wicked stall. So, you know, here's the airflow, and as my angle of attack increases, I'm going this way, right? When the wing can no longer produce enough lift to counteract weight, it stalls. I can't fly anymore. And this thing has got a real wicked right wing drop because of the laminar flow wing. So it gives you all those benefits, but you have to give it speed for it to give you the benefit back. But if you go to an air show and you see a Mustang doing aerobatics, there's a time, especially in like a loop, when he's coming over, now he's starting to come back the backside. His angle of attack is decreasing as his airspeed increases, as he's now coming downhill, and you get the right combination of angle of attack and airspeed, and these whistle. So you'll hear that, and if you ever see it and hear it, whoa, what was that whistle? It only lasts a fraction of a second. It's the airflow over this protective tube. The Merlin. We talked about the A model. The first airplane had an Allison engine. Just a fabulous, fabulous airplane engine. But it only had a single stage, single speed supercharger. What the supercharger does is it allows you to keep manifold pressure, which is in essence power, at higher altitudes. And with the single speed, single stage, once the Allison got above about 15,000 feet, it started losing manifold pressure. The supercharger wouldn't boost it to maintain a higher manifold pressure. And so they started losing performance. And they were experiencing, and they could see the war coming, was going to be a higher altitude war, just like it was. So it was, again, a British guy who worked for Rolls-Royce who said, let's put a Merlin on this Mustang. Because they were putting Merlins in their Spitfires, in their Hurricanes, in their 4-engine bombers, the Lancaster. So the Merlin was a thing, and a good thing. And so it was a Brit said, let's put a Merlin on one of these and see what happens. The Merlin had a 2-speed, 2-stage supercharger and could keep that manifold pressure at the higher levels all the way up to 40,000 feet. Boom. That's your B model. This airplane, they redesigned, they put the machine guns in the wings. The A model had them underneath or over top of the nose. And so now putting a Merlin in the Mustang, and there's your war winner. A Brit. The cooling system, right? The liquid cooled. So I'll reiterate, you take a bullet in the wrong place and you lose your coolant, and once the coolant is gone, you have a very small number of minutes before the engine freezes. And now you're a glider, and it's not the best glider, and hopefully I can get onto friendly territory, or I'm bellying into a farmer's field. So look at all these blue and gold lines. Those are all the tubes taking coolant back to the radiator, cooling it, right, exchanging heat for cooling, and then moving it back up here. So what they found as they're going through combat is in an air-to-air environment where this hand here is the enemy, and if it's shooting bullets at the Mustang, the bullets are primarily going to hit on the top side. And they found it was a pretty rugged airplane. But now, like we talked about in the presentation, so now we're doing interdiction, we're strafing airfields, we're dropping bombs. Where are the majority of the bullets coming from? The tender underbelly of the Mustang. And so now you get because these tubes, they run all the way back to behind the cockpit into the big radiator.
It's the one that runs out the outside there.
Yep, and so that it gets covered here. No, I don't think that. I think that's something different. So the blue and the gold are your cooling systems. Yes.
What is this tank or whatever it is right there?
That's a cooling tank.
For storage or something?
Yeah, just like your radiator in a car, you have to fill up some reservoir with coolant. So that's the main tank. We call it the header tank. The aftercooler tank sits right back here on the top back part of the main bulk of the engine here. So this was the vulnerability of the Mustang and also inline engines in general when your real threat from bullets is coming up from below you, was the cooling system. Keep this in the back of your mind because we're going to finish it. That is metal. That's aluminum. Remember that. So, Trace talked about the radiator, right? And I'm going to expand on what he said because the gentleman who asked the great question, burst my bubble. What does this sound like to you guys? Cool air comes in, there's heat exchange, hot air comes out. What does that sound like? Jet engine. So there's that thrust, the Meredith effect. Especially, you can see the doors. The front one is for the oil cooler. The rear and the bigger one, that's for the radiator. And that's scheduled, we run it full open on the ground when we're not putting a lot of air through here. There's not airflow. But once we get airborne, we put it in the automatic mode, and it has sensors all through those pipes, and it will schedule a little bit, open and close, primarily closed when the system's working right, to keep the temperature of the coolant where it needs to be. So when you get good airflow in and that door closes, there's your venturi as you're narrowing it down, and you get thrust, the Meredith effect. Horsepower out of the prop, thrust out of your radiator. So now back here, we're going to re-engage on the metal because that's aluminum as well. What's this? Fabric. The majority of the airplanes, especially earlier in the war, so late 30s, mid-war or interwar and early war, all of the flight control surfaces are fabric. Rudder, elevator, aileron. It was lighter, it was easier to patch. You get a bullet up through here and it can leave a nasty exit wound, where if it's fabric, it's real easy to patch. So couple of the reasons they went with fabric. But now go to where these airplanes, especially in a dive, are now pushing the transonic region, and they had what was called compressibility. So the faster and faster they go, the airflow on top and bottom of the surfaces are starting to separate. Compressibility, so they lost many an airplane and many a pilot diving at 450, 480, 500 miles an hour because the air separates and this is no longer effective anymore. So he pulls back on the stick and this moves, but there's no air there to react on. So one of their, other than training the pilots and education on what the hell's happening, why are we going in, they came up with the idea of let's put metal on here because it's going to give less. And if I only have one air molecule coming over here because all the others are on top, I at least get some effectiveness to try and help with that pullback so I can recover. But they stayed with fabric. If you look at the T6, granted an earlier airplane, a trainer, so a different mission, all of them are fabric. Even the Navy birds, we have, where's our big Hellcat over there, nose pointing at us. All of their flight control surfaces are fabric. All right, we're gonna come back here. Last thing I got for you, we're gonna come back where we started. But the last thing I want to talk to is about this D model with the bubble canopy. Because the visibility that this gives over the earlier models is just outstanding. And a pilot loves it because the visibility is awesome. The B's and C's and the A models, the fuselage pretty much went all the way up to the back of the cockpit. And then you had your transparency that just slid back and forth. But I mean, like right here, in a pilot's sitting in the seat is fuselage. So they go to the bubble canopy and they like that, but it changed the airflow over the top of the fuselage and into the rudder. So they added this strake, this fillet here, that gave it two things. One, it strengthened the vertical tail, and it also gave a little bit of stability, longitudinal stability, as your angle of attack is increasing, because it, angles this way. This is the airplane, but I'm flying this way because I'm slower. So I have to increase my angle of attack to get the same amount of lift. So as I'm going this way, I need to maximize every little air molecule coming over here for stability of the airplane. If you look at the B's and C's, the fuselage came straight back to some point about here and then went straight up the tail. So they had to add this fillet to strengthen and provide that stability. And so a great question was asked about, one, does this horizontal stabilizer move? No, it doesn't. And so that was a lesson learned in aeronautics that was cemented by Chuck Yeager's Speed of Sound run. Was when we started going that fast, the stabilizer and elevator were not enough to control the airplane. So they went to a stabilator where the whole thing moves. So that was a natural progression from learning the hard way, the compressibility. I'm losing air off of these surfaces, to going even faster and going through the speed of sound, where now the rush of the speed. This was not enough. Just an elevator was not enough. So now the whole thing moves, the whole piece. Questions? Yeah, the young man first.
What's this little piece for?
That's a trim tab. What a trim tab does is allows you to trim the airplane, to move those little tabs to try and get the airplane to fly at the attitude you want, straight and level, a bank, nose up, nose down, hands off. So you can fine tune the control of the airplane with these trim tabs. right? So every time you change speed, you need to retrim to take pressure off the stick.
So they're on the rudder and they're on the ailerons.
All three axes, at least in this airplane.
So it's
You know, the
fine-tuned.
Zero over here, they have the same thing. All three surfaces, rudder, elevators, and ailerons, have trim tabs, but only the elevator can you control in the cockpit. So all the others are maintenance functions. Man, I let off the stick and I rolled really hard to the left. And you tell that to your maintenance guy and he adjusts the tab a little bit.
Fine tuning.
Yep. Question?
I was gonna ask about what time, what year they changed, where they went from one piece.
I'm going to guess, I don't know, but probably 44 in that era, or, you know, probably starting to design it in 43. Now they're on airplanes in 44 as this compressibility issue is starting to get figured out. As they're losing airplanes that just never pull out of the dive because they pull back and there's no air. Okay, and that guy's a smoking hole. So as they start to figure it out, and now the engineers say, here's what's happening. Here's a way we might be able to fix it.
Is this a counterweight?
Yeah. Okay, anything else?
I see the cable. There's this phrase, it's fly-by-wire and fly-by, I always get them mixed up.
Oh no, this is not fly-by-wire.
What do they call it?
This is all cables and pulleys and
Right.
torque tubes and push rod tubes.
Fly-by-wire. even though I'm
Fly-by-wire
looking at the wire.
is electrical.
Electronics.
So think F-16, and I'm moving the stick a little bit, and all I'm doing is inputting pressure.
Right.
And the computer says, ooh, that's a lot of pressure. I'm really going to move the surface. That's
Transducers.
fly-by-wire.
Transducers. And
So the wire in that instance is electrical wire.